Fall is here. What can I say? Fall is here. I'm ringing the bell. I'm not going back to school, but I'm gonna give you some book recommendations. I wanted to recommend fall themed, fall vibe books for you that could scratch a bunch of different autumnal itches. So why are we wasting any more time? Let's just get started with the first category of fall books that I want to talk about with you. That is cult-like following. These first three recommendations are books that I have read that are very popular on either BookTube, Book Talk, or just like well-beloved series or books that I truly believe are so worth the hype. I read these in the fall, or I wished I had read them in the fall. The first book that has a cult-like following, you will hear every single person recommend you read if you haven't already, of course, Throne of Glass. I have not finished the series. I'm currently on Queen of Shadows. It is a book that I actually need to finish this fall so that I can move on in the series, but I already know, even if you just read Throne of Glass, it just is such a good book to dip your toes into fantasy. It reminded me so much of what reading a series felt like when I first got into the Hunger Games when I was a kid and I was addicted to reading the books. Literally, Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, Assassin's Blade, and Heir of Fire, I consumed within, I think, a week, which is crazy. The writing is really easy to get into. It is very fast paced. And as it says on the back, it is a must read for lovers of epic fantasy and fairy tales. They're following this young girl who is a notorious assassin in this world and kingdom that she is in. She is called out of the depths of a horrible prison to become the king's champion. She gets chosen to do this because of her reputation as an assassin. Such a good time. I literally consumed this in 24 hours. It has a cult-like following for a reason. Don't be too snobby. Pick it up. The next book that has a cult-like following that I want to recommend is a book that I read in the spring, and I very much so wish I had read it in the fall, even though it was fine. But it just truly, I really think this book will do the most for you if you read it in the fall, and that is The Invisible Life of Addie Larue by V.E. Schwab. It's about a young woman, and we follow her life across literal centuries because whenever you learn more about her backstory, she wants to escape this life. She wants more for her life than what is in front of her, and so she makes a deal with the devil in the woods. The problem with the deal she makes, it's always too good to be true. She can experience everything and live as long as she wants to, but unfortunately no one is ever going to remember her. And not just when she passes away, no one's gonna remember her. It is like the second someone turns their head from her, they completely forget who she is. You're just following her life and her journey across all these different beautiful places she's visited and the stories she's collected. You also really understand the perils of what it is like to walk through life alone. There is a romance in here that is really beautiful, but it's definitely not the focal point. She's in New York and in Paris, and it's very atmospheric. The writing is very lyrical. Can't recommend this book enough for the fall. The last two books I want to recommend for the cult-like following category is a duology, which is Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows. Yes, I don't have the covers on these because why would I? Look at them. Even though the dust jacket is beautiful. Are you joking? This is one of my favorite quotes from Ruthless Vows. Of course, I'm going to display it. When I first read Divine Rivals, I read it peak time. I read it in November. It is quite literally a fantastical, whimsical, historical fantasy You've Got Mail. And if you love You've Got Mail, you are going to love this series. If you love writing and stories and letters and just ink on paper and boots on wet leaves in the city, it took me to another place, and I absolutely love the romance in here. I just love them so much. I love all the characters in these books. Really think you should go in as blind as possible. These books are recommended for the fall and in general for a reason. Please, I think out of everything, these two are my personal favorites, so definitely pick this up. Next category of books I want to recommend you for the fall is specifically cozy books. What I mean by that, books that I envision you reading curled up in a blanket. Even if there is some high stakes, it's not real really high stakes, you know what I mean? A book that you can kind of turn your brain off and enjoy. That's what I mean by cozy. I'm gonna put photos on the screen so you can understand what I'm trying to communicate with these books. First book that I want to recommend is one that has relatively mixed reviews, but I really loved it, and that is A Tempest of Tea. This book is about a group of outsiders in a historical fiction fantasy world where they run a tea shop in the heart of the city. Tea shop by day is looked upon very fondly in the eyes of the general public. Truly against all odds, the group of main characters we're following have made a life for themselves because of this tea shop. By night, the tea shop actually becomes a place for vampires to drink blood. The blood is served just like it would be as tea, or like a blood supplement type thing. The found family in this book, the writing in this book, it's not a perfect book, but this definitely is one that you could just sit back and enjoy. This is a book that has darker elements but still feels palatable. You can swallow it and be fine. That is A Tempest of Tea. The next book I want to recommend, I actually don't have a copy of, is Sorcery of Thorns. This book is a young adult romantasy, I believe. This book is perfect for the fall. It is also perfect if you love stories because the magic system is based around libraries and the power of stories being written down. We're following our main character who is an orphan. She lives in this massive library. The bookkeepers that live there basically have raised her. She's just grown up living and breathing with these books. Why that's so important is because books, grimoires as they call them, are actually living, breathing things. It can like infiltrate your mind. It can have conversations with you. That's all you should know about the premise, but it definitely is perfect for the fall time. It's so cozy with action happening, but it's not anything crazy. I would do anything to read this book over again under a fuzzy blanket with some tea. So good. The next book I want to recommend is one that you probably will see recommended to you a bunch as well. A Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. This book is the epitome of a cozy fall time. If you want to read about a beautiful romance, very heavy themes of found family in this book as well. It is so magical and atmospheric and fun. We're following a young witch who is a part of a very secret society of witches. Witches in this world aren't allowed to talk about being witches. Very frowned upon to let anyone know that you are a witch, that you can do magic. Our main character has created an online platform. She's basically like a witch influencer, but people don't think that she's an actual witch, if that makes sense. There's someone who ends up watching her videos and requests her to come to their house that is far away, and she learns that she is being requested to teach these young witches magic, which means that she's been found out a little bit. That's all you really need to know about the story. Also very much gives The House in the Cerulean Sea vibes. I liked that book. I think you will also really like this one. The last book I want to recommend for the cozy category is actually a nonfiction book by one of my favorite nonfiction authors, Bread and Wine by Shauna Niequist. During this time of year, fall parties, Halloween parties, Thanksgiving, so much gathering. This is just a really wonderful reflection, as it says on the cover, love letter to life around the table. If you're kind of wanting a palate cleanser, if you're also wanting recipe ideas, such a cozy book. And even on the back it says, read these pages curled up in bed or in the bathtub, and after you'll bring it to the kitchen with you. That's exactly what I did when I read this book. I also will read anything this woman writes. This is definitely one of my favorite books by her. I read it in the fall for the first time a couple years ago. It is the perfect cozy fall nonfiction book. The next category of books I want to recommend to you, I have labeled under childlike. These books are gonna be more middle grade fantasy or graphic novels I really enjoyed, or just books that make you feel like a child again. And I think being a child in fall is such a marking experience. The first book I want to recommend in this category is The Grace of Wild Things. I read this book in June, I believe, and I have not stopped thinking about it. I think this might be one of my favorite books of the year. It does encapsulate all 4 seasons, but the overall book itself gives fall because it is an Anne of Green Gables retelling, and Anne of Green Gables is fall. She's the one who says, I can't believe we get to live in a world where there are Octobers. Anne of Green Gables is fall, and with an E is fall. The Grace of Wild Things is fall. We're following a young girl who is an orphan, and she is trying to go on this quest of harnessing her magic because she knows she's different. She knows that she might be a witch, but she doesn't know what to do about it. And on her journey, she stumbles upon this house, the very grumpy old witch in it, and that's really all you need to know. You're following her discovery of herself, such easy and descriptive writing. It made me feel like a kid again reading this. The next book I want to recommend I don't have with me, but it is called Baker's Magic, and I read this book in winter, which I do think this also could be a winter book, but it really gave such fall energy to me. It is about a young girl who, she's an orphan, she has magic. There's a similar trope with all these childlike books. However, the magic system is, you guessed it, baking, pies and breads and pastries. The descriptions of food and cooking and baking in this book is why it is a fall book to me. You can smell the kitchen when you read this book. Relatively quick as well. Beautiful found family themes. They also have a recipe for the famous sticky buns in the book in the back. A book that has sticky buns is a fall book. That is Baker's Magic. The next couple of books I don't have with me because I actually read them from the library, but I want to own all three of these books. Garlic and the Vampire, Garlic and the Witch, which is a duology of graphic novels, and you are just following a little garlic living its life in a garden with a witch, and it is so sweet. Illustrative style. These two graphic novels are wonderful. These were so heartwarming. When I finished them, I literally looked over to my husband and I was like, I just feel so unbelievably happy. They just made me so happy. Highly recommend if you want to also get into graphic novels. These are very easy to consume and you could finish both of these in like an hour. They truly made me feel like a child, and I want to give them to my future children one day, hopefully. The other book that I want to talk about that is a graphic novel is The Moth Keeper. The Moth Keeper is about a young child in this town where it is always night. Not always night, but the town operates at night primarily and sleeps during the day, and at the beginning you kind of get the lore of why that is. Following this child step into the role of Moth Keeper, which is a very big deal in this town. That is all you really need to know about it. It is also super quick, but it is also just very heartwarming and very fall. The last two books I want to recommend in this category are actually some of my favorite books that I read as a child. Very much are fall books to me. The first one, The Magician's Nephew by C.S. Lewis. This is part of the Chronicles of Narnia series. If you only want to read one, after this one comes The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. So if you wanted to read this and then The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. Honestly, The Magician's Nephew is one of my favorite books. I fell in love with reading because of this book and the Spiderwick series, which I didn't include in this, but it should be. The Spiderwick series owns fall. Magician's Nephew is a prequel to The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, and the whole Chronicles of Narnia series is so whimsical and atmospheric, and it is also partly set in London, in the woods, and it's just is such an autumnal book. And the last book in this category to follow along with this one is one of my other favorite books as a kid, which is Black Beauty. Quite literally just following the story of a beautiful black horse. It is so easy to read. There's tension and drama, but it's all very PG. I love this book so much, and is also a classic, so you can kind of mark that off your list if that's something you're into. Last category of books I want to recommend to you is called Creepy, but I'm enjoying myself. Love gothic creepy vibes, but I don't like actual horror. I don't enjoy being scared. All of these books give you the right amount of creepy. You're still, you know, snuggled up on the couch and can go to sleep. The first book I want to recommend I don't own. Actually currently listening to it. I'm almost done with it. The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. I went into this book completely blind, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm not gonna say anything about this book. All I'm gonna say is it is creepy, it is gothic, it is magical realism, it is mystery, it is confusing, it is sensual and romantic. It is so good. The writing in this book is so good. I've gotten like, I've gotten like a shiver or two from reading this book simply because it's like, oh, what do you mean? Like, what's happening? But I can sleep at night. The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. This book I'm going to recommend is actually a classic, and that is The Picture of Dorian Gray. This classic is very easy to get into. Obviously there is a little bit more complicated writing, but to me it was fun to digest.
Oh, hello. We have a visitor. We have a visitor. Thanks for joining. Oh, just want to show some booty. Yeah.
All you really need to know about this book is you're following a painter and young man, and this painter paints a portrait of the young man that ends up changing his life for better or for worse. It is thrilling and intoxicating. It's also a lot of commentary about vanity and status. Truly gives dark academia. It gives Rory Gilmore sitting on a bench in Stars Hollow. Highly recommend. Next book I want to recommend, I also don't own a copy of because I borrowed it to read it. Vicious by B.E. Schwab. In this book, you are reading about the two worst men on the planet who basically crack the code of how to become a superhero, but it's not giving Marvel or anything. It's very gritty. Both of them are so horrible. Like, they're two horrible people. I loved this book. It is creepy and scary and a little gory, but not too much. I could sleep peacefully, and I honestly didn't want to sleep because I wanted to finish it. Background characters as well in this book are so engaging. So many layers to this book. Reading about people, gosh, I hate you, but I'm rooting for you somehow. You have to read this book in the fall. You have to read this book in the fall. There's also a lot of interesting commentary hidden within this book about religious cults. That also is what makes it a little eerie and gothic while still being fantastical. Cannot recommend enough. Very last recommendation I have for you. I also don't have a copy of With Me Cultish by Amanda Montell. Dipping back into nonfiction for a second. I don't know about you, but I love learning about cults. But I don't like learning about cults to the point where, again, I'm terrified to go to sleep. Amanda Montell talks about what makes a cult from the perspective of language and linguistics. It is nerdy, but it is so easy to read, and if you have access to an audiobook, she narrates the book and it is just so fun. She has such a wonderful sense of humor. You're learning about these things that are gross and confusing and icky, but she makes it so enjoyable. The way that she wraps up learning about all of these creepy cultish things is so positive and hopeful. I think of fall also like, I want to be a student. I want to learn something. Cultish is definitely the perfect book for you. That is all of my fall recommendations for you. I would love to hear what you're wanting to read this fall, what some of your favorite fall books are in the comments. I will be posting another video about my very extensive fall TBR. There's too many books and not enough fall, in my opinion. Please let me know if you read any of these books, and I am wishing you the coziest, warmest, snuggliest fall yet. All right, bye.